In a certain part of Tokyo in the year 2030, a mysterious glowing crack suddenly appeared in the sky. In response, 100 members of the self-defense force were dispatched to investigate the other side of this mysterious rift. However, out of all 100 soldiers, only one returned safe and sound. The hero remembers that everyone gave their lives so he could recover them. He also recalls that there were monsters everywhere. These monsters ended up killing everyone around him, from friends to the commander, leaving only him. After this, the government created a special task force dedicated to closing the rift, known as the Force. But soon, this group ran out of volunteers and then began recruiting members from the general public. As a result, people ended up being forcibly recruited through a random selection process. However, even though it was a random selection, only those with aptitude were added to the force. This aptitude was determined by the judgment of the weapons they possessed. In this story, the protagonist recalls when he was recruited into the force. He remembers that he had hit rock bottom. This happened because the weapon he obtained was incredibly weak. Trembling and screwed by the situation with a broken sword, he states that this is impossible. He thinks he must have been chosen by mistake. Quickly, a monster approaches and captures him. At that moment, it throws his body away, making him crash into the ground. What the hero did not know was that this weapon, despite being bad, had a secret ability. A yellow lightning bolt begins to descend from his hand as he tries to move. Using all his strength, he declares that he wants to injure an enemy at least once. After wounding a monster, the boy collapses to the ground and a yellow screen appears in front of him. It notifies him that he has unlocked an achievement, being the first to attack an area boss. It also informs him that his level has reached 10 and that an evolution has been unlocked. Looking at his weapon, he realizes that it is evolving. Faced with this, he decides to seek out more and more monsters. Thus, he manages to evolve until he reaches level 60. He explains that this is the story of how a failure like him ended up becoming a hero and saving the world. And so, after this brief explanation, our story begins. In the newspaper, it is reported that the Force has begun its special recruitment. It explains that a year ago, mysterious rifts started appearing all over the world, and from them, terrible monsters emerged. Because of this, the government and the self-defense force created the Gate Investigation and Subjugation Unit, the Force. And thanks to the efforts of this group, the number of monster victims is decreasing. Most of the people in the Force are individuals recruited from the city. One of the representatives explains that the Force does everything it can so that people do not have to live in fear of these monsters. One of the reports states that today another round of recruitment will begin. It declares that those who have been notified should prepare to participate in this selection. Meanwhile, in an ordinary house, a bespectacled boy ends up being knocked down by a blonde. The blonde calls him useless little brother, and this is the protagonist named Momoda Awa, a 20-year-old unemployed man. Suddenly, the hero takes a knee to the torso and wonders why this has to happen to him. It is explained that his mother passed away 10 years ago. His father quickly remarried, bringing another child into the family. However, that same child is always using him to relieve his own stress. He states that he has lost his family's trust. And outside the house, he does not fit in at school either. Soon, he concludes that everything has been taken from him. Lying on the ground, he thinks that if he had something to do with his life, he would do it immediately. He even considers the possibility of suddenly being able to use magic or something like that, which is a pretty crazy idea. Or maybe not so crazy, as he ends up receiving a notification from the Force itself. Upon seeing the message, the hero begins to get out. Since he was unconscious, he wonders what time it is. Picking up his phone, he notices he has a message. Opening it, he sees that it is from the Force and realizes he has been chosen as a candidate, receiving a recruitment notice. He reads that the selection starts today at 7 p.m. Those who do not show up will be taken by force. Upon seeing the message, he simply remains silent. Quickly, he becomes skeptical, thinking it is some kind of cruel prank. Not caring much about it, he simply throws his phone away and sits on the floor, as he thinks about the possibility of it being real and finally escaping this hell. Suddenly, something begins to materialize as if it were some kind of glitch. It is someone calling for Momoda, who is the hero. In this case, it is someone from the Force carrying a sword. Desperate, the boy questions who the man who invaded his room is and asks why he came. Responding, he says that they are the beacon of hope for humanity, being the Gate Exploration Unit of the Force. Approaching gently, he tells him that he must go today at 10 o'clock and that he was informed about the recruitment. Completely changing his expression, he explains that they did not see him arrive on time, so they must come to get him. In shock, the hero finally realizes that the message was actually real, and he understands that this man is his hope to finally escape this hell. Without thinking twice, the purple-haired boy just grabs his wrist, saying that they don't have time to wait. The boy asks to wait, but the recruiter says they don't have time. At this, the hero even tries to argue, but the man interrupts him, warning that time is money. With a fake smile, he states that he hates wasting his time. At that moment, his colleague ends up conjuring some kind of magic with the sword. As a result, the boy becomes completely unconscious. The purple-haired one thanks her and says she should have done that 1 minute and 36 seconds earlier. Sometime later, the protagonist begins to wake up, wondering about the sound he is hearing. It is a pink-haired girl calling him. She approaches his body with a sweet smile and says that he has finally woken up. Seeing this, the boy quickly moves away, becoming completely embarrassed. Looking around, he questions the world he is in. At that moment, someone pulls him by his coat. He scolds the purple-haired one and says that he took too long to wake up and that the entire selection was delayed because of him. After that, he orders the boy to step forward and follow him. At this moment, the hero begins to recall the events. While running his hand over his coat, he remembers that he ended up getting a cut. However, when he lifts his shirt, he sees that there is nothing there and questions whether it was all just a dream. Irritated, the recruiter keeps saying that he must follow him. Sometime later, the purple-haired one starts giving a speech, thanking everyone for participating in the selection. He explains that the reason they are all there today is to find new companions to fight alongside them. Someone raises their hand and says they have the possibility of making it, to join the team for the good of humanity. From a distance, the hero thinks that he knew the Force was really incredible, but questions whether it seems like a religion or something like that. Curious, he starts asking about what will happen in this selection. The recruiter announces that the selection is about to begin and that they must follow him immediately. He explains that inside the armory they will find a few weapons that can defeat the monsters, and that if a person has aptitude, they will be able to wield them, but not just anyone will be able to use them. Smiling, he reveals that the weapon will choose its own owner. All the participants, including the protagonist, are confused by what the man means by that. After that, he explains that the selection will last 10 minutes and that those who passed will remain standing. Seeing this, all the people become even more confused, asking what they should do. Reflecting, Momoda understands that this organization is suspicious, with a lot of mystery surrounding it. But he realizes that if he manages to join them, he will finally be able to escape from home. This makes him declare that the first thing he must do is try to wield a sword like that. Suddenly, one of the people in the crowd begins to question what is happening. Several people are holding swords that are actually glowing, and they wonder if this means they have been chosen. Smiling, the recruiter tells those who were chosen to go to the designated area. Nervous, the hero realizes that the sword will glow if he is chosen. Afraid of not being chosen, he tells himself that he doesn't care which weapon he gets. He just wants to be chosen to get out of there. Suddenly, the hero hears the same sound he heard when he woke up. Then, he approaches the older man, asking if he heard anything, and the man says he hears nothing. He says he can hear the sound of a bell, questioning where it is coming from. Following this strange sound, he approaches a sword. As he touches its hilt, a great amount of energy bursts from the blade. All the people around him start to be impressed by what they are witnessing. After that, the protagonist begins to feel a strong pain in his chest, wondering what is happening. Suddenly, a portal opens on the ground. A voice in his head warns that it will choose him. It is some bizarre creature trying to introduce itself. Suddenly, several green markings begin to appear on his body like some kind of tattoo. At that moment, the boy panics as he wonders what this is. Responding, the monster says that in the name of the contract, it will possess the boy. It informs him that he will have its blessing for the rest of his life. At that moment, the recruiter approaches, asking if he is okay. With his hand on his forehead, the protagonist wonders if he might be having some kind of hallucination. At this moment, the purple-haired one notices that the boy's sword is glowing and congratulates him. Everyone around him is impressed, wondering what kind of weapon he chose. At that moment, the glow of his sword intensifies even more. Impressed by its size and power, the hero understands that, with this, he will finally become strong. Recalling his past, he realizes that now he can change. Sometime later, at the Force's training center, Momoda was chosen by the sword, and it was decided that he would join the Force. It has been a week since his life in the organization began. He thinks that he finally managed to escape from his sister, but not in the way he had planned. Because, from what it seems, his training has been very rigorous and difficult, both physically and intellectually. With a blank expression, the hero understands that, at this rate, he will soon die. He thinks that he didn't know he would be training so hard and that he thought he could go straight into combat, since he has these special weapons. He recalls his illusion that his life would improve simply by joining the organization. However, he realizes that this life is nothing but pure suffering. At this moment, a colleague approaches him. He introduces himself as Hawa Asaka from the 4th Squadron. He explains that they will be training inside a gate later and asks why the boy looks like that. The old man reveals that he had told the boy's roommate 3 days ago to inform him. However, he quickly dismisses it and smiles, saying they should go to the gate together. Sometime later, both arrive at the designated gate in the forest. Looking around, he notices that everyone is already gathered, which is excellent. Deeply irritated, the red-haired one questions the protagonist about why he is there and comments that it will be difficult if he gets in the way. However, the old man explains that he brought Momoda with him. The man explains that failing to share proper information is a mistake, and he does not tolerate that within the Force. So the red-haired one just apologizes. Smiling, the old man pats him on the back and warns that they will start preparing. He explains that this is the gate they will be entering today. He comments that it is dangerous for someone at level 1, but even so, the captain will be fine as long as someone experienced is with them. Introducing a strange robot, he says they will use this tool to measure and once again confirm the danger classification. Then he tells them they must move forward and do their best to teach Momoda. However, he ends up being completely ignored, feeling a little depressed. The blonde then says that he must go with them and that, in fact, he also needs to use this to premeditate the danger classification. However, he says that everything was fine when checked yesterday and that it rarely changes in such a short time, so they could simply skip this step. Then he explains that this document must be signed before entering and asks Momoda to do so. Giving the boy a bit of confidence, he explains that he is a newcomer, but that regardless, he was chosen by the sword. Then he explains to the boy how he should do it, signing with his hand. Placing his hand on the document, he closes his eyes. As a result, he ends up being transported inside the portal. It is a mystical world full of monsters. Smiling, the old man welcomes the boy to the other world that exists within the gate. Being very confident, he informs everyone that they will defeat the boss and that, in the meantime, they can have fun attacking other monsters. Smiling, he states that now the training will begin. The red-haired one manages to defeat some monsters and says that he expected more, since they are called monsters, after all. Two of his colleagues are impressed with Sugawara for being so strong. At that moment, the old man says that people are chosen by their weapon and can simply fight, so the boy just nods. The man says that they should leave the monsters to others, as there are not many in the area, and then suggests that they review their homework. Meanwhile, the old man asks if he knows how to destroy the force's gates. He responds that inside the gate, there must be a dungeon, and inside it, a monster. As soon as they defeat the boss, they'll be able to leave. Proudly, the old man says that this is incredible because he can see the fruits of the protagonist's efforts. Adding some information, he says that the boss will always have a red cross on its forehead and that he must not forget that. Getting straight to the point, the sensei asks them to observe this swordsmanship skill, saying that the monster's weak spot is their ears. Nervous, the hero realizes that he's finally going to fight monsters using his sword. At that moment, he approaches some kind of strange bat. The hero ends up stepping back in fear, pushing his colleagues. At this moment, the teacher warns him that he must keep in mind the reach of his weapon when using it. At that moment, he tries to hit the monster, but he seems to have no success. Awkwardly, the old man says that it was a good effort from everyone, and that each person learns at their own pace. He concludes that they must work hard not to fall behind, while the hero thinks that he can't do anything. Hayasaka announces that he will defeat the boss now and that they will have another training session tomorrow. However, the red-haired one ends up stealing the spotlight, saying that he will do it. With just one strike, he manages to defeat the monster with great ease. The bully states that the boss was a small and weak monster, which completely impresses the teacher. Convinced, the red-haired one comments that it was no big deal since he is the strongest. Then, as he looks back, he is completely defeated by another type of monster. His classmates are horrified by the scene in front of them. Seeing this, the protagonist kneels down and starts vomiting on the ground. Everyone is paralyzed in front of the immense power of this possible boss. At that moment, the hero only thinks about running away. Quickly, his teacher grabs his arm and everyone starts fleeing the area. Desperate, he shouts for the students to retreat immediately. At the same time, another student ends up being caught by the monster. The teacher finds a cave and tells him to enter. Inside the cave, he explains that these creatures sense their prey through temperature. One of the students, desperate, grabs the teacher by the collar and questions what happened. Confused, he comments that the boss was defeated and questions why they can't return to the world. Answering, the teacher says that the most likely scenario is that the boss has changed. Apparently, this is a rare and incredible phenomenon. Two boss monsters fight for territory, putting their lives on the line. Then the loser ends up being devoured, and the winner of this battle becomes the new boss. This particular monster can imitate everything it eats, making it extremely dangerous and known as mimicry. He comments that if this monster is here, the danger level has already increased. This information shocks all the newcomers. Desperate, the boy wonders what happens now. Answering, the teacher says that this place is now at danger level 4. The protagonist is shocked to see this information, because at this level, a full team with a captain and vice captain would supposedly be necessary. In shock, the students begin to panic and question whether they are going to die there. One of them wonders why this happened, and interrupting, a girl says that they need to go back through the entrance. Looking back, one of them questions what she is talking about. She explains that if they arrive through there, she is sure they can return the same way. One of the boys, irritated upon hearing this, approaches and questions whether she has lost her mind. He states that there is no way to leave this place without defeating the boss, and at that moment, the very boss appears, completely eliminating his colleague right in front of everyone. After that, the boss decides to take him too. Thus, he becomes the third student to be eliminated. Terrified, the hero realizes that they have been found and that they need to run now. However, a traitor pushes him. It is the teacher himself, leaving the boy on his knees. Explaining, the man says that he has no choice. With a strange expression, he says that the boy is too weak to fight and that he should at least land a hit. Desperate, Momoda begs the teacher to stop, and when he looks back, he is met with the boss's glowing eyes, along with a red cross on its forehead, indicating that it is indeed the boss of this place. With his body trembling, he accepts that he doesn't know how to fight and that he will meet the same fate as his colleagues. While bracing himself, the boy realizes that his body won't move at all. Quickly, he is lifted into the air. While suspended, he wonders if he went through all this training and hard studying just to die like this. At that moment, the monster hurls the protagonist to the ground with full force, shattering the entire terrain. He begins to feel immense pain all over his body. He realizes that his red juice is warm, but his body is cold. At that moment, voices crying for help start coming from inside the monster. It is his 4 former colleagues begging not to die. At that moment, these voices about not dying echo in the boy's mind. Determined to survive, he tries to grab his sword. Some kind of strange magic occurs and his eye completely changes. With his broken sword, he manages to hit and wound the monster. He is impressed by this, as it is the first time he has ever heard a monster in his life. However, he looks up and begins to question what that sound is. Suddenly, an orange screen appears in front of him. It is an unlock achievement, notifying him that his first attack was against an area boss. Seeing this, the hero is amazed, realizing that this is a game-like screen. Many notifications begin to appear before him. One of them informs him that his weapon is evolving. At that moment, his sword begins to crack as if something inside it is trying to break free. Then the protagonist realizes that his weapon has completely changed. It is now a fully transformed sword. At that moment, the boss starts roaring, completely breaking the boy's train of thought. He is sitting on the ground, facing a very powerful monster. With his sword in hand, he states that he has no reason to believe he can defeat this thing. Then he remembers that everyone in his house hated him, and after joining the force, they were happy enough to let him die. At this moment, he thinks that if he dies now, everyone will be watching him. In fury, the boy starts tearing up and begins to radiate some kind of powerful energy. Both blue and yellow lightning begin to spread across his body. Charging at full force against the boss, he declares that he will use his own hands to find a place where he belongs. Quickly, the monster tries to defend itself using its own body. With great effort, the boy barely manages to dodge. Then with his sword, he lands a hit on the boss. Without giving up, he launches into a frontal attack. And with his sword and no experience at all, he manages to wound it severely. With little difficulty, the boss of the stage ends up being completely defeated. Looking at the carcass of the beast, he cannot believe what he has just done. However, his victory is short-lived as he is suddenly struck with a fatal blow. He begins to question how this was possible, as the monster had already been defeated. But upon closer inspection, he realizes that there are 2 identical bosses. He quickly understands that if he cuts one, 2 more will grow in its place. At that moment, the creatures begin to pull his body. As he is about to be finished off, he wonders if this is truly the end for him. Suddenly, a massive burst of flames engulfs one of the monsters, forcing it to release the protagonist. Just before hitting the ground, he wonders what just happened. Then, from afar, he sees the symbol of the Force on a uniform. It is a girl with a demonic appearance. After being struck, one of the monsters begins to regenerate. Deeply irritated, one of the monsters prepares to fight. Looking up, he sees a girl surrounded by flames, ready to finish it off. She then completely changes her appearance, now exuding an icy aura with blue hair. It seems her ability has changed entirely, now being the complete opposite. Thus, the girl manages to trap the boss and with a sweet smile, freezes it. At that moment, the portal begins to open. Just before leaving, she notices someone lying on the ground. It is the protagonist who wakes up to see this woman. Looking closely, she realizes that he is a survivor, so she decides to take him under her care. However, the hero accidentally touches one of her airbags, doing something very suspicious. He is completely shocked, as that was not what he intended to do. He becomes utterly embarrassed. With a puzzled look, she comments that the boy has been touching her airbag for quite some time now. At that moment, a massive amount of strawberry juice bursts from his nose, causing him to faint as the heroine begs him not to die. Sometime later, the hero wakes up. He wonders where he is and what happened to him. At that moment, the girl who saved him appears. Cheerfully, she approaches, greets him with a good morning, and says it is good to see him awake. She explains that the doctors came and fixed everything and that, apparently, he had been defeated. At this moment, the protagonist is in shock. Quickly, all of his memories start rushing back as he wonders if he was saved by her or something like that. The girl also mentions that his strawberry juice was gushing out in a very funny way. At first, the boy understands that he needs to thank her and then asks for permission to do so. However, at that moment, he begins to feel a sharp pain in his chest. Placing her hand over his, she tells him that it must hurt since he went through a lot because of the monster. In a very gentle manner, she tells him to relax as the pain is just proof that he is alive. Hearing these kind words, the boy starts to feel relieved. However, the image of his defeated comrades quickly comes to his mind, making him cry instantly. Noticing this, the girl asks if he is crying. Smiling, she says that it is natural, since it was his first time inside a gate, and everything went wrong, making it terrifying. At that moment, she tells the protagonist that he did a great job surviving and calls him a really tough guy. Encouraged like this, the boy begins to cry even more. Meanwhile, the girl asks why he is apologizing. Calming him down, she tells him that they are alone there and that he can cry. In shock, the boy realizes that this girl is a very kind person. Suddenly, he starts to notice that he is missing his glasses. He thinks that he usually can't see anything without them, but now he can see perfectly. At that very moment, the girl realizes that she forgot to introduce herself. Smiling, she says that her name is Onigashima Misaki. Also introducing himself, the boy says that his name is Momoda Ewa. Suddenly, the vice captain of the 1st Division, Tsuriki Hadeto, appears. He orders the boy to come with him immediately. However, the girl questions what he is doing. He approaches Misaki, informing her that this is an urgent summons from headquarters. At that moment, the commander announces that the boy will be taken to trial due to his responsibility for this incident. Shortly after, the protagonist is taken to some kind of organizational trial. Everyone around him is surprised to see the boy. The man then says they will get straight to the point. He explains that his misjudgment in assessing the gate's danger level resulted in the deaths of a total of 23 people, and he declares to the rookie that he is to blame, because according to the report, he was the one who determined the gate's danger level. Thus, he intentionally led the squad into a high-level gate. In shock, the boy starts to stutter, questioning what he is talking about. But he is quickly struck by a powerful electric shock from the handcuffs, while the vice captain states that he is not lying. Seeing the young man on his knees, he asks if he realizes what he has done. He declares that the boy was practically some kind of murderer. Looking around, the boy notices the presence of his teacher. The same teacher intervenes, saying that he had told the boy to confirm the dungeon's danger classification. However, it was stated that it is unprecedented for a gate's danger level to change so frequently. At that moment, the vice captain realizes that the only witness they have is a veteran who has done much for the organization. Thus, they believe that his statement is credible. At that moment, a man approaches the protagonist, telling him to remain silent. Thinking about his teacher, he wonders why he would lie like this. He realizes that surviving despite being weak is simply unnatural, and that he must have managed because he knew the danger classification. He understands that this was done as revenge. At that moment, the vice captain states that they are shameless and have no regrets about what they have just done. Someone steps forward, saying that the force must come together completely to respond to the gates. It is the captain of the 1st Division, Adelaide. The silver-haired woman declares that putting teammates in danger or becoming weaker is something they cannot accept. Quickly, the woman uses her magical ability, restraining the boy with some kind of plant. With her magic, she manages to shape some form of public execution. Hearing that he is about to be executed, the boy goes into shock. Seeing the audience laughing, he realizes that he shouldn't have understood that no one will ever believe him. It's always being the final outcome no matter where he runs. At that moment, the captain simply snaps her fingers, saying that he was a good boy. At that moment, the blade begins to approach his body, when suddenly the table starts to freeze. In shock, the woman questions who dared to oppose her. It is the captain of the 3rd Division, Onigashima. Seeing the pink-haired girl, the protagonist is extremely surprised. As he looks at her, he realizes that she is different from the others. However, he never imagined that she would be the captain. Meanwhile, the captain of the 1st Division asks Onigashima what this means. Responding, the girl says that this man is a complete rookie, and that making him take responsibility for the incident is insane. Everyone on foot starts getting excited because now things are about to get interesting. Finn comments that it makes sense, but that this boy could be one of the monsters in disguise. At that moment, Shinga says that he is nothing more than a filthy animal and questions who else could take responsibility. Approaching the girl, he grabs her by the head, asking if she wants to adopt this useless dog. The pink-haired one then steps back. Raising her hands to the sky, she announces that she has a proposal. She asks for Momoda to join her squad and declares that she will keep him under surveillance and strengthen him. Hearing this news, the protagonist is completely shocked, unable to understand what is happening. Sometime later at the 3rd Division headquarters, the commander announces that Momoda will be joining everyone. Upon receiving this information, the group members do not seem very enthusiastic. Furious, the girl questions why they are always so boring. However, she ends up being ignored and side conversations take over. At that moment, someone calls for Misaki. It is the vice captain of the 3rd Division named Kija Hanka, 29 years old. She explains that everyone will be confused because Misaki invited the rumored guy to the squad. She also points out that he is wearing a surveillance collar. Kija states that she is the vice captain and that she wished the girl had at least spoken to her before doing something so reckless. Changing the subject, the girl tells the protagonist that he got lucky because his punishment was quite lenient. At that moment, the hero remembers that he was not executed thanks to Onigashima. He starts thinking about how to thank the girl, and she informs him that the rookie will have his first day of service tomorrow. This completely surprises the hero. Trying to boost his self-esteem, the captain tells him to regain his confidence and to do his best. Then, she suggests that he will have to be placed in a team since they are going on a mission. At that moment, Momoda remembers that he was informed that he needs to form a pair of teammates with equal abilities. Approaching the group, he asks if any of them want to face him. One of the group members questions whether the hero didn't let his teammates die. Trying to reassure them, the girl says that it is okay and that he won't do that. And that besides that, if he ever decides to do something like that, she will take full responsibility. At that moment, the vice captain says that Samus suggested an appropriate way to handle this and that no one will believe Misaki. Exuding confidence, Misaki declares that she will bet her own life on it. Then she asks if everyone agrees. This information surprises everyone present. After saying that, the commander simply dismisses everyone. Sometime later, the protagonist calls for Misaki. Surprised, she asks what he wants. Curious, the boy asks why she is doing all of this for him, from stopping his execution to even betting her own life. At that moment, the girl approaches him. Quickly, she grabs him by the coat, pulling him even closer to her face. And completely breaking the mood, she starts pinching his cheeks. Making him embarrassed, Misaki asks if he thought she was going to kiss him. Explaining, she says that the boy is under her supervision. With a sweet wink, she says that her orders are absolute. However, the hero can't stop thinking that she is pressing him with her airbags. Being completely assertive, the captain pushes him against the wall. While admitting that she has always been watching him, she reveals that the way his sword shone also happened to someone she deeply respects. Relieved, the protagonist understands what she meant. However, the hero realizes that it is the same light and immediately questions where this person is. Responding, she says that this person is no longer among them because they all died trying to protect her. At that moment, she admits that when she saw him, she thought it was her turn to protect someone. Suddenly, she says that she knows the protagonist is not that same person, but that either way, she can't just leave him alone out there. As she leaves, the girl apologizes, saying that things seem to have gotten a little too heavy. The scene indicates that he must do his best and that he can try to join a team before tomorrow. Reflecting on this story, the protagonist just remains deep in thought about Onigashima. Suddenly, a group of people calls him. Completely awkward, one of the boys apologizes for what happened earlier, saying that they were a bit too harsh. Hugging the girl, he says that he can join his team if he wants to. He comments that it's okay since the captain went so far to ensure his well-being. Above all, the hero thanks Onigashima and declares that this time he will prove his worth in some way. However, he still didn't know that, at this time, the worst part was yet to come. Jumping into the future, the protagonist appears fighting against several strange monsters. In the blink of an eye, he starts falling from the mountain, as he thinks that his transformation had only just begun. Back in the present, Misaki starts wondering if Momopi managed to find a team. At that moment, the vice captain calls for her, informing her that, apparently, one of the teams entered the gate much earlier than planned. Meanwhile, the protagonist is inside the gate in a level 3 danger zone. Soon he recalls that the bottom of the cliff was covered with monster corpses, barely managing to twist his legs. But when he looks around, he realizes that everyone has disappeared. He starts wondering if they got lost or if, by any chance, he was left behind. Suddenly, one of the wolves lunges at him, interrupting his thoughts, but luckily, the boy manages to block. The wolf in question seems to be some kind of alien species. Counterattacking, the protagonist lands a precise hit, finishing it off. But it seems like he hit too hard as half of its face is already destroyed. He realizes that when he thought he had made friends, he was abandoned, and that hurts, but he needs to fight. However, one question lingers in his mind. Why does he need to fight? At that moment, he recalls Jumisaki's words saying that she bet her own life. With that in mind, he understands that now he has a reason because for the first time, someone believes in him and praises him. At that moment, 3 wolves jump toward the boy at the same time, while he thinks that he can't keep being protected like this. With his face completely changed, he declares to everyone that he will protect her. Several game notifications start appearing in front of him. One of them informs him that his weapon is evolving at this very moment. Several beams of light start emerging from his sword. It is now completely electrified with a rather different appearance. Additionally, his pain is also disappearing. Curious, he wonders if, by any chance, his sword will keep changing its appearance. Despite these evolutions, he thinks that maybe his situation hasn't improved that much. Because, as if things couldn't get any worse, the wolf boss appears. The hero is somewhat apprehensive, but he still thinks that maybe he has a chance. Charging forward with everything he has, the protagonist declares that because of Onigashima, he will succeed no matter what. At the same time, outside, the traders celebrate, saying that her betting her own life was hilarious. One of them says that the boy got what he deserved just as a sword approaches his neck. With a furious expression, Misaki asks if what he just said is true. Since the guy is really slow, he only now realizes the presence of his captain. The trader tries to explain himself, saying that it's better to stay quiet and just leave. However, the captain interrupts him, questioning if he really thought that would make her happy. Her vice captain then approaches, asking her to stay calm. Suddenly, emergency news from headquarters is broadcast. It is about gate number 23 in Region 8, which has completely disappeared. The vice captain then asks if that wasn't the gate where Momoto was. One of the traders is completely shocked to see this information. With a smiling expression, the vice captain comments that the closing of the gate can only mean one thing. That, in reality, the boss ended up being defeated, which leaves the 3 traders absolutely terrified. Meanwhile, Misaki runs through the forest searching for the hero. The protagonist's face is deformed and he looks extremely exhausted. Quickly, the girl manages to reach him. The hero says that she lived within him. As he stands up, he comments that she also accepted him. He explains that he is clumsy, but that he chose not to give up because he could become stronger and thus be able to change. He affirms that he believed in that and kept pushing forward. At that moment, the protagonist grabs Misaki's arm, promising that he will never betray her. Without hesitation, he declares that he will protect her and in doing so become stronger. Then he tells her not to be sad for him. Hearing such a confession, the girl becomes completely flustered, saying that it messed with her heart. Meanwhile, people begin talking about the rookie, saying that he handled a level 3 gate all by himself. Another one says that this is something incredible. One of the boys questions if he really defeated the boss and closed the gate alone. Being arrogant, he comments that this rookie is pretty annoying for trying to stand out more than him. For managing to close the gate alone, the protagonist was praised by the Force organization itself. That old silver-haired woman tells him to keep working as hard as possible as Onagashima's dog. Terrified, the boy just nods. At that moment, he realizes that none of his achievements have changed the fact that he is still treated as a prisoner. While cutting his hair, he recalls that everyone kind of treats him the same way, which strangely makes him happy. Afterward, the boy finishes cutting his hair, now looking completely different from before. As he walks through headquarters, he thinks that something else made him even happier. That thing was the fact that he finally felt like he belonged somewhere. The captains notice that the boy cut his hair and ask if something triggered it. In response, he simply says that he wants to become much stronger, and while he doesn't fully understand the connection, he leaves it at that. Then he explains that he has always been weak, and this was his way of saying goodbye to his old self. Acting quite shy, he says that he feels embarrassed and that his hair color has changed, along with his scar, which is now completely invisible. At that moment, the captain comments that it's okay because that is just proof that he has survived until now. With a romantic look, she tells him that both his scar and his hair are very cool. Completely changing the subject, the girl informs him that she has his first task as part of the team. She also tells him that he can simply call her Misaki since they are all on the same team. Sometime later, Misaki's group is gathered for their first mission. She explains that she will handle the preparations and asks the vice leader to introduce the 2 newcomers. At that moment, the girl asks everyone to introduce themselves. The red-haired one introduces himself as Inuna Haruki, a former heir to an inn and a member of the 3rd Division. Meanwhile, the green-haired one is named Saruman Meijin, a former heir to a brewery, and both are 23 years old. At that moment, the boy tries to step forward to introduce himself, but the red-haired one says that he has no intention of remembering any other man's name. Just that statement alone makes the protagonist feel quite uncomfortable. Completely changing the subject, the guy immediately asks Misaki if she likes him. Embarrassed, the boy says that he isn't really sure. Seeing this response, the arrogant one gets completely irritated, questioning why he is acting that way and calling him an idiot. The green-haired one says that he also doesn't like the hero, but clarifies that he is totally different from the red-haired one. While staring at the protagonist, he comments that he heard he defeated a boss alone. With a murderous look, he comments that even so, he never thought he would look so weak. Not wanting any trouble, the vice captain simply tells the 2 of them not to be like that. Misaki then appears, asking if everything is ready to go, as they are about to attack the gate. Acting quite suspiciously, the red-haired one comments that he will be ready whenever she is. From afar, Momoda notices that this guy behaves completely differently when it comes to Misaki. At that moment, the green-haired one tells the boy that he might have only gotten this far by luck, and that he himself will judge whether it was luck or skill in the end. Stating that the atmosphere here is quite strange, the protagonist just agrees, while thinking that apparently this won't be so easy. After passing through the portal, they arrive at the level 3 danger zone known as the Diamond Cave. Seeing the place, the boy is impressed, but in the background, the red-haired one states that this is no time for him to be standing still. The vice captain then explains that he must not lower his guard in the gates. She says that no matter how beautiful a place looks, it is still a dungeon in the end. Confirming the girl's statement, 2 ice cannonballs appear. At that moment, the red-haired one warns Shimoda that the monsters are coming. And while looking at one of the descending monsters, the protagonist corrects him, saying that his name is Momoda. Quickly grabbing his sword, he strikes the cannonball. However, the attack has no effect at all. Meanwhile, the arrogant one easily destroys one of the monsters without any difficulty. And the same applies to his companion, who also manages to destroy another cannonball. Seeing all of this, the hero says that it's incredible. Kijiro approaches, telling him that he must not lose to them now, as he also has to show his strengths to Misaki. The boy begins to explain, saying that he wasn't planning anything like that. Embarrassed, he thinks that no matter the reason he was doing this, he needs to try his best as well. Looking up, he sees another cannonball coming straight toward him. Then, gripping his sword with both hands, he manages to deliver a precise and fatal strike. At that moment, he realizes that he just needs to attack them where there is no crystal, which is actually quite obvious. At that moment, the boy moves towards several cannonballs to finish them off one by one. From a distance, the red-haired one comments that apparently it's not just luck, and his colleague agrees. Shortly after, Misaki announces that all the monsters in this area have been defeated. Exhausted, the protagonist realizes that he managed to defeat many of them. But as he looks at his sword, he gets a bad feeling. Looking to the side, he sees the vice captain warning that something is strange. She explains that they entered 3 hours ago and have reached the very depths, and yet the boss is nowhere to be found. Hearing this, the boy starts wondering what's going on. But he ends up becoming extremely exhausted, probably because of everything he did against the cannonballs. Trying to mock him, the red-haired one comments that the boy seems to be tired, but he doesn't even finish his sentence before collapsing to the ground along with Sarabime. Additionally, even Misaki notices that her strawberry juice is dripping from her nose. The vice captain says that even she has suffered the same thing. Desperate, the protagonist realizes that if this continues, everyone will die. Suddenly, a menu screen appears in front of him, notifying him that he will now experience abnormal recovery. The blue-haired girl approaches, relieved that the boy managed to regain consciousness. Concerned, he asks the vice captain if she's okay. Kija says yes, but that in any case she won't be able to fight for much longer, then shows her completely corrupted arm. Then a theory arises that there are probably toxins spreading through the air. She comments that they were likely poisoned without realizing it by some weak toxin that accumulates gradually, since everyone who collapsed on the ground has the exact same mark. Showing an act of chivalry, the protagonist takes his coat to use it as a cover. Annoyed by the situation, the boy says that apparently no one has woken up yet. At that moment, the vice captain says that it doesn't seem to be a poison just yet, but it is developing into some kind of acid. Continuing the theory, she comments that she has the feeling that this is not a cave at all, and that it looks more like the stomach of a giant monster. With a humorous tone, she says that this way it makes sense why they couldn't find the boss no matter how much they searched. However, the hero comments that there were also other monsters in this place, which suggests that it might be similar to what happens with humans, since there are life forms like viruses and such, and in that sense, antibodies protect them in the same way. Then he concludes that the suspicion is that the monsters have a similar purpose. Worried, the protagonist says that in this situation, it's as if they were food and questions whether they will be digested at this rate. Summoning her sword, Kija says that everything will be fine because they will figure something out before that happens. She comments that she was warned not to use too much magic. At that moment, the woman starts using some kind of water magic, forming 2 wings around her. After that, her expression completely changes, stating that even so, the price is too high to save everyone. At that moment, she sees her captain using her water magic toward the ceiling, opening a hole in it with extreme ease. But as a consequence, the protagonist ends up getting drenched indirectly. Kija explains that her sword's ability is to liquefy anything and cut a substance very similar to water. But she says that, unfortunately, she was only able to cut a small part. Suddenly, she starts singing randomly, annoying the protagonist, then announces that now the poison in the air is also weaker. Then the hero says that the screen has disappeared as well. Hearing this, the vice captain is extremely confused because he was referring to the game screen. Looking around, she understands that they can't waste time here. The hero suggests taking everyone outside, but the woman explains that the dungeon will remain active unless they defeat the boss. Looking at one of the already defeated monsters, the girl seems to have an idea. She decides to strike the body of the already defeated monster with her sword. While singing cheerfully, the girl keeps trying to break through the barrier. She states that they will get through this way. She explains that the plan is for them to go to the center of the body until they find some vital organs. And by striking those parts, no matter how gigantic the monster is, it will become completely useless. 5 minutes ago, the girl said that they should focus on what they can do now and suggested that they defeat the boss together. Then, she explained that doing so would make Misaki very happy. In the present, the vice captain continues striking her blows as she navigates through the body. In shock, the girl questions whether this woman is truly reckless for having such a plan. Looking to the side, she comes across an irresistible crystal sphere. With her sword in hand, she approaches the object, thinking it might be the heart. Without a second thought, the hero decides to go all in and attack to save everyone. However, he loses his balance and falls into the water. The vice captain manages to save him while he says that he dropped his sword. But one explains that he must defeat the monster himself and questions whether the boy has made up his mind yet. She explains that if he has found his determination, he will have to take the next step forward. Having an epiphany, the boy accepts the vice captain's advice and decides to dive down to retrieve his sword. With it in hand, he thinks about protecting Misaki and becoming strong. Heading toward the heart, he declares that this will be his first step toward his goal. Then he quickly plunges his sword into the encrypted crystal object. Unable to hold on, he lets go of the sword. The monster starts making a lot of noise after being struck. Even the protagonist himself ends up falling into the water again. Both he and the vice captain are dragged downward, as if through a waterfall. They finally manage to escape from the monster, and it seems like it has been defeated. The hero tells Kija that she's amazing, and she explains that it was Momoda who delivered the final blow. At that moment, Momoda asks if the hero could see the others, and she says yes. After the boy leaves, she heads toward the monster. With a vial in hand, she manages to collect some strange sample, and with a suspicious look, declares that the mission is complete. Sometime later at the hospital, the red-haired one starts complaining that the boy was asleep, calling him weak. Responding to the provocation, the green-haired one tells him to stop making excuses and says they were simply immature. Misaki approaches the boy, telling him that he needs to sleep and rest well because he might still be slightly poisoned. Being a complete simp, he says that as long as she is taking care of him, he will be fine. Curious, the red-haired one asks where Kija and the other guy are, and the girl responds that they weren't feeling well and went home. Meanwhile, the protagonist is visiting the Force's research laboratory. The blue-haired girl explains that they research everything beyond the gates and also what can help inside them. She says that they develop tools for the group and that the boy will be under their care. Concerned, the boy comments that everyone seems very busy at the moment. He remarks that she seems familiar with this place, and she explains that she has an old friend from school working there. She says that she visits often and that he is called Chio. She comments that the boy might find him unapproachable since he only thinks about research, but that deep down he is a good person. As they go deeper into the laboratory, the girl is able to identify Chio, the person she was talking about. However, upon seeing the man's face, the protagonist is completely shocked. The vice captain announces that she will introduce him. She explains that this man's name is Sekaway Shio, the head of research. She explains that this is chief researcher Sekaway Shio, 28 years old, and that Natus has also been his best friend since high school. However, the boy questions who said that he was her friend, and she explains that he gets along very well with her. The girl calls the chief Shio-san, and then the protagonist asks if he is a man. Deeply irritated, the head of research approaches, questioning if there is a problem with his name. And upon seeing the collar, he realizes that this is the guy who is under supervision. With a terrifying expression, the chief says that if he had been executed, he would have conducted some interesting experiments on his body, and that he already had all the plans prepared for that moment. Intervening, the girl says that, as he can see, he is passionate about research, and that they both have some misunderstandings. The hero asks if he shouldn't stop smoking inside the laboratory, and she explains that it is his space and therefore his rules. Kija comments that they have already wasted too much time and says she knows how impatient the boy is. So she decides to show the scientist the sample she collected, which fascinates him. Impressed, he says that this is fantastic and that he will take a look at it immediately. Curious, the boy asks what it is, and she responds that it is bodily fluid from the giant monster he defeated. Surprised, the man says that this sample contains venom and various mineral components, making it very interesting. Then he declares that his research will now be able to advance even further. Changing the subject, the vice captain mentions that Shio also researches swords and suggests that the boy ask him to take a look at his. Analyzing the sword, the man says that it is not as the rumors say, as he heard that the blade was broken and damaged. Momoto says that it has changed a lot since he bought it, so the chief asks him to explain. Then the protagonist asks if he knows about the screens that appear when monsters are defeated, which shocks the research chief. The man says he has never heard of that before, while the hero thought it happened to everyone. Blowing smoke from his head, Shio says that he should not apply his own sense to others. He explains that he sees the swords and the technical skills given to the chosen ones not as something merely suitable for them, but as fixed, and that they are almost like expected copies of the soul, which is why they never change. He comments that it would be impossible, and that he must be the only one who can see this, meaning it must be part of the sword's ability. Curious, he asks in what context these screens appear and also questions what the triggers are. Completely immersed in these possibilities, he starts asking 1,000 questions about what the criteria for the screen to appear would be. After this bizarre moment, the smoker tells him to come back tomorrow morning so he can take a look at the sword. Then he explains that the next mission is in the Deep Sea City, a place classified as Danger Level 4. This information leaves the boy somewhat terrified. At that moment, the blue-haired girl asks Momoto if anyone has ever taught him about danger levels. She explains that besides the strength of the boss, there is also the number of monsters and the number of offspring, which are of a species similar to the mother. Upon hearing this, the boy is confused as he has never heard this information before. The woman explains that the higher the danger level, the fewer the number of offspring. But she states that they still do not know the logic behind this, possibly being something like the strong not grouping together, and that unexpectedly, both monsters and humans might have this information in common. With his body trembling, the hero warns that she is scaring him. However, the woman tells him to forget it, as it is just a hypothesis, and that what she means is that there will not be many monsters, so it will be easier for him to focus on the fight. Upon hearing this information, the protagonist ends up having another epiphany in his mind. The vice captain interrupts, saying that she has not told the others about the task and suggests that he go visit them. As he watches the kid leaving the laboratory, the man wonders how long this surveillance will last. The vice captain says that he is once again saying scary things, while Shio says he is just being realistic. Changing the tone, he comments that the way the sword shines is the same as that boy's. At that, he asks the girl to make sure that he does not suffer the same fate. As she leaves, Kija asks if he will want to know in case the boy's sword changes again. Grabbing his wrist, Shio replies that yes, but there is something more important. He informs that he will need to undergo a checkup. Analyzing the piercing gaze, he questions whether he has used that technique again. Feeling awkward, the girl says yes, but asks him to give her a break, as there was no other solution this time. At that, her friend approaches, asking if she will ever listen to her own warnings. Showing her completely corroded arm, she explains that the poison this time seems to be a new variant, being quite effective. Giving an injection to his friend, he warns that this will be the last time because it is not good for her. Smiling, the vice captain says she will be prepared for the worst. Meanwhile, the hero is apprehensive because the next task will be level 4, the same as when he almost died. At that moment, he panics as he starts thinking about the possibility of everything happening the same way. Interrupting his dark thoughts, he slaps his own head. He tells himself that he must hold on and that he is sure he will return alive again. Meanwhile, the vice captain, along with the boys, is on a beach. They are playing volleyball along with Misaki, Tiana, and the protagonist in a fan service episode. Showing no athletic ability, the boy ends up getting hit on the head, as he wonders if, by any chance, this dungeon is level 4. Shortly before, he enters the portal, thinking that this time the task is level 4. But at the same time, he wonders why this place looks like a normal beach. The vice captain appears, saying that they should relax a bit to cool off. The boy questions whether it is really okay to play in a level 4 portal, and she explains that the task will be underwater, so they should soon be safe in the location. At that, one of the boys appears, saying that for the first time he agrees with Momoda. The green-haired one says that even if the level 4 dungeon might be submerged, that is no reason to play around. Seeing Saru's attitude, the boy thinks that he is very brave and cool for expressing his opinion that way. At that moment, Misaki appears in a provocative outfit, saying that she would like to play. Seeing this, the green-haired one takes heavy damage and collapses to the ground. Completely changing his mind, the green-haired one says he will follow Misaki's lead, even if she goes too far. Shortly after, the protagonist is swimming underwater, noticing that it is still so bright. The vice captain asks if everyone can hear her and comments that she will explain the task again. She says that they are all heading toward a city at the bottom of the ocean, as they assume the boss is there. She states that they have no idea what other monsters might appear and that they need to be careful. At that moment, the redhead calls for the rookie. Irritated, he scolds him, saying that he should not be shocked just because things are going well for him. The green-haired one questions what the two idiots are doing, while Misaki says they are just boys being boys. At that moment, the redhead says that he is much stronger than the boy, but even so, his body is trembling as he looks at something else. At that instant, the bully looks back and finds himself facing a gigantic enemy. Everyone decides to retreat without a second thought. They think this is very bad and that they should focus on reaching solid ground as quickly as possible. Even underwater, the green-haired one prepares to fight. At that moment, the hero thanks him, but he explains that he is just repaying what he owes. Momoda wonders if they are talking about the Crystal Cave. Nervous, the green-haired one says that sword strikes are too weak underwater and that they have no choice but to retreat. Then the arrogant one says he will handle it, but the captain tells him to stay put. However, the redhead argues, asking to be allowed to show his good side too. Scolding him, she explains that if he releases his power here, it will be dangerous, and that he can only provide support, and that the best course of action is for them to take down the monster together. So she asks Momoda to draw his sword. The 5 team members prepare to fight the creatures, which quickly flee. Laughing, the redhead says that the monster got scared of how strong he is and ran away, while the green-haired one says that he did nothing. Misaki tells the vice captain that she just had a brilliant idea on how everyone can safely reach the city at the bottom of the ocean. At that moment, she asks Jin to use his sword again. That way, they manage to create some kind of tunnel. Misaki explains that the idea came to her when she saw Jinjin's attack, and that now they do not need to worry about monsters. The blue-haired one says it seems quite sturdy, and that they should be able to proceed safely. Inuta complains to Saru that they are leaving him behind to have fun with Misaki alone. With a smug smile, the green-haired one tells Inuta that he will have to do his best if he does not like it. At that moment, both begin arguing about who is stronger. Looking around, the hero notices something strange happening. Paying close attention, he sees the presence of a giant shark breaking the tunnel. Impressed, Misaki questions whether it is not a bit early for other monsters to start attacking the place. With a sweet smile, she asks if everyone is ready. Quickly, the whole group starts fleeing again at high speed through the underwater world. The pink-haired one explains that they need to conserve their stamina and asks how much longer until they reach the dungeon. In response, the vice captain says that it is just ahead, more than 50 meters away. As they approach their destination, the protagonist sees that it really is a city at the bottom of the ocean. Still fleeing from the boss, the redhead says that it is very persistent. While escaping from the shark, the protagonist struggles to enter the city. He manages to place his hand on some kind of barrier to get inside. That way, he successfully enters without much difficulty. The captain begins to fall from the sky, celebrating that he finally managed to escape. But she ends up falling on top of Momoda and crushing him. Sometime later, the captain says that they managed to escape unharmed. The surrounding area is a maze because they are submerged, yet there is no water around. At that moment, the vice captain comments that it seems like that monster gave up, which makes sense since there is no water in this place. Or perhaps there is another reason why it stopped pursuing them. Then the redhead questions how long the boss will keep hiding and comments that they need to hurry. Suddenly, some aquatic creature grabs the protagonist's foot, pleading to be saved. In shock, the hero wonders if it might be a person, possibly a survivor from another group. However, the creature reveals itself to be some kind of crazy scorpion. And demonstrating immense evolution in his reflexes, the hero quickly manages to strike it with his sword. After defeating it, he is surprised to realize there was another monster. The bully then warns him not to be so careless and calls him an idiot. Suddenly, the entire group starts being surrounded by the same creatures that tried to attack the protagonist. Some of them even manage to attack Misaki and trap her. However, the hero rushes to her rescue to try to protect her. But both he and the redhead start getting captured. Seeing no other choice, the bully understands that it is time to show off. He declares that he will handle this right here and now. At that moment, his green-haired colleague grabs the protagonist so they can move away from the area. With his body trembling, the hero witnesses the sheer power of the redhead. Confident, the bully states that he will burn everything with his special technique. And looking at the protagonist, he asks what he thinks of his power. He comments that he must have found it quite fascinating. However, Jin approaches his colleague, calls him an idiot, and questions why he is using that attack in this situation. At that, the bully starts apologizing for being much stronger than his colleague. Hearing this, the boy completely loses his composure. Holding his weapon, Jin asks the redhead to stay still so he can figure out what his sword can do. Mocking the situation, Inuta tells his colleague that he cannot do anything against his power. Out of nowhere, both begin to argue. At that, Misaki says they have always been like this and that it is best to just leave them be while she looks for the boss. Suddenly, the system notifies the boy that he has unlocked a skill condition after defeating 100 monsters. Meanwhile, the hero understands that for them to reach this kind of situation, it means that the two might actually get along. Suddenly, the hero starts feeling something very strange. In an instant, the ground rapidly opens, making everyone slide down as if they were on a water slide all the way to the bottom floor. At the last moment, the green-haired one manages to use some kind of ability to prevent the group from dying. Thus, everyone lands on the ground without feeling much pain. The vice captain comments that it seems the floor collapsed during the previous battle. Taking the opportunity, Jin tells the redhead that this was his fault. At that moment, both start another argument, without realizing the presence of a giant squid, which is most likely the boss. Seeing the monster before them, both immediately grab their swords to prepare for battle. Also taking position, the vice captain warns that they must be more careful, as this is the dungeon boss. At that, the arrogant one says this is perfect because it saves the group the trouble of looking for it. A squid's tentacle ends up being cut off, but it quickly regenerates. Then the vice captain says that cutting the tentacles is useless and that they will probably have to attack the main body. Quickly, Misaki uses her ice power to try to freeze the monster, but so far they have not been able to get close to the main body. In that case, the redhead says that he will have to cut faster than the creature can regenerate. Provoking his colleague, Jin says there should be a limit to how simplistic he can be. Suddenly, another monster appears, attacking the protagonist from behind. On reflex, he manages to defend himself using his sword. The Irania around them notice that there is a horde of tentacled monsters. They all head in his direction to crush him, and surprisingly, he manages to push them back and damage them all using only his sword. He declares that he is a member of the third squad, just like everyone else, that he should handle the small fry. Hearing this, the captain becomes somewhat embarrassed. While fighting, the hero thinks about how he is part of the squad and that he needs to defeat as many of these creatures as possible so they can focus on the boss. Exhausted, the redhead realizes that the boss continues regenerating endlessly. Then he asks the rookie how he is handling the monsters, and he responds that they keep coming faster and faster. Momona understands that he wants to help but cannot reduce the number of monsters, so he starts thinking of a way to eliminate them all at once. Suddenly, he hears the sound of a bell, just like the one he heard during the selection ceremony. A new window appears, stating that he has achieved the feat of defeating 100 enemies in a single battle. In shock, the boy wonders if this means his sword is going to evolve once again. However, the system notifies him that he has obtained the skill Clairvoyance. Seeing this, he questions what skill means. Without much ceremony, his ability is quickly activated in one of his eyes. With this, he is able to see multiple points on his enemies' bodies. Guided by these targets, he decides to strike one of the enemies. He is surprised because apparently clairvoyance focuses on weak points. Looking around, he realizes that he can destroy each one with just a single strike. In the background, the redhead complains to the boy, saying that they are just persistent. At that moment, the protagonist saves the arrogant one from being defeated by another monster. This impresses the redhead as it took just one strike. Irritated, he asks how he did that, and Momota responds that he can see weak points. Not understanding anything, the redhead questions what he is talking about. Then looking behind, he notices several bodies of defeated monsters. At that moment, he realizes that the hero really did defeat all those monsters, but he finds it strange because it was so sudden. Curious, he starts asking what is going on with this guy. The hero uses his clairvoyance ability on the boss to see its weak points. Then he discovers that the weak point is the center of the cross-shaped mark. However, one of the squid's tentacles ends up making the hero fall to the ground. At that moment, the redhead appears to save him. Additionally, he scolds him, telling him not to let his guard down. Then he asks again if he really can see the enemy's weak points, and if he can calculate the right timing to hit that spot. However, the hero explains that he cannot get any closer than this. Irritated, the boy grabs him by the coat, telling him to stop whining, because he hates cowards. Smiling, the redhead explains that he is going to take the hero closer to the boss, and says he is doing this because he thinks the protagonist is not just lucky. At that moment, the bully reveals that he wanted to be the one to finish this, and that if he finds out the boy is just lucky, he will beat him up. He explains that he can only help for a short time because the tentacles regenerate quickly. Then he states that the boy must finish this in an instant. At that moment, the bully starts using his most powerful ability. In a furious state, while holding his sword, a very powerful and demonic aura exudes from his body. Seeing this, the whole group is in shock. This wolf's soul manages to hold the boss down for a while. At that moment, the hero rushes toward the monster to attack it. However, he notices that it is already regenerating its tentacles. Surprisingly, Inuda arrives just in time to protect him, but he ends up being seriously injured. Excited, he tells the protagonist not to stop. He starts bleeding, but he promises that he will take the boy closer. Smiling, he tells him to go and not to worry about him. Determined, Momoda runs toward the redhead, who quickly gives him a boost and throws him into the air. Facing the monster, Hiro thinks that he has only one chance to make this work, and that he will succeed after everything Inuda has done. Exuding an aura of determination, the boy prepares to deliver the final blow, striking a deep and precise hit with his sword. Suddenly, all of Inuda's ability begins to influence the battle. At that moment, his arm ends up being damaged. After defeating the monster, the hero jumps off it to reach his comrade. Both the vice captain and Jean rush to help Inuda. The redhead keeps insisting that he cannot lose. After a long struggle, he finally brings down the dungeon boss. Seeing it lying on the ground, he wonders if he really managed to do it. Without hesitation, the captain begins hugging him out of concern. Crying, she says that it was reckless, but at the same time, it was amazing that he defeated the boss. She says that she will definitely save him the next time he is in trouble. Suddenly, the redhead approaches the protagonist, saying that he defeated the boss, but he should not think that he can do it alone. After that, he extends his hand to the boy, saying that he did very well. Momoda then shakes his hand, thanking him for everything. The captain hugs them both, saying that they make an incredible duo. Proudly, she states that both of them did well and that tonight they are going to have a party. Meanwhile, Jin remains with a serious expression. Suddenly, he shouts for everyone to pay attention. At that moment, a large piece of the ceiling falls near the boy. Looking up, everyone realizes that the ceiling is breaking apart. Jean explains that apparently the castle could not withstand the force of the battle. Then the vice captain asks everyone to leave and return to underwater mode, because the dungeon will disappear in just 3 minutes, and if they stay here, it will be dangerous. After that, everyone starts exiting through the sea, and suddenly, they encounter another monster. Inuda complains, saying that it is very persistent, and using his ability, the hero manages to identify the creature's weak point. Momoda then takes the lead, saying that he will handle this and that everyone else can go. Grabbing his sword, he heads toward the monster to finish it off. While thinking that he has finally been accepted, he understands that he needs to become even more useful. However, the hero is unable to finish his strike as a warning message appears in front of him. Because of this, he starts falling toward the depths. Not wanting to lose this opportunity, the shark moves in to devour him. But quickly, the captain reaches the monster and stares at it with a murderous gaze. And without hesitation, she delivers several strikes with her sword, even underwater. However, even after saving the hero, he continues sinking toward the ocean floor. As he falls, he wonders what happened and quickly remembers that his suit was broken. He also questions whether he is dead, but soon realizes that he is still breathing. When he opens his eyes, he sees that he is being kissed by the captain in a beautiful and perfectly drawn scene. Sometime later, the hero wakes up, and the first thing he sees is the captain greeting him with a good morning. Seeing the girl in front of him, he is shocked. Looking around, he realizes that he is in the infirmary and starts wondering what happened since he was at the bottom of the ocean. Quickly, he remembers that kiss and becomes completely embarrassed. Inuda also appears beside the hero, but he is completely bandaged up and almost unrecognizable. Trembling, the protagonist asks if he is okay. Responding, the redhead says that he broke 30 bones and also suffered severe damage, so the boy apologizes for the question. However, the redhead says that soon they will be heading to the next mission, but the hero explains that there is no way he can participate with such severe injuries. But looking closely, he notices that Inuda's right arm is still in place. Suddenly, the vice president appears to speak with the boy. Not understanding anything, Momoda wonders how he ended up back in the infirmary. Then, it is explained that Misaki managed to defeat the shark, and in doing so saved him. Additionally, he lost consciousness after his suit burst and almost stopped breathing. Then they comment that they returned just in time. Hearing this, the hero understands that the kiss was crucial to his survival. At that moment, Inuda explains that all of this happened because the boy got overconfident after defeating the boss. At that, the captain asks Inuda if he wasn't super worried about Momoda just a moment ago. Embarrassed, The warrior denies it, saying that he was talking about her. He explains that they were separated from the rest when the castle collapsed, having no idea what happened to them. At that moment, a notification appears on the leader's bracelet. She announces that she has been summoned to a captain's meeting and that she will talk to them during the next mission. Being very observant, the vice president notices that the protagonist wants to thank Misaki for what she did. With a sweet look, she tells him that if he goes now, he can still catch her. Almost exploding with embarrassment, the boy says he will do it right now. Being quite slow, Inuta asks why Momota is so nervous, and the vice president replies that it's youth. At that moment, the boy goes to find Misaki and calls out to her. She asks if something happened, and he explains that he wanted to thank her. With his head bowed, he thanks her for saving him. Seeing this, the girl's expression completely changes. Embarrassed, the boy immediately remembers the kiss he gave her and cannot even look at her lips. Being very direct, Misaki asks if he is worried about the kiss. First, redder than a chili pepper, he says yes. Feeling somewhat awkward, he begins to say that he does not remember it very well. Trembling, he says that she was just giving him artificial respiration. However, she interrupts him and says that this will be their little secret. Leaving the boy in shock, she simply tells him that she will see him again on the next mission. As he watches her, he wonders if she has always shown like that. In shock, he realizes that his heart is aching and wonders what is happening. Suddenly, he starts hearing a noise. Looking out the window, he sees the presence of Sarubayam and understands that she must have just arrived. It is Jin questioning whether Inuta has already grown attached to the rookie, saying that he really is simple-minded. The green-haired one tells the vice captain that he cannot trust Momota. Irritated, Inuta tells him to stop talking nonsense and that he should give the rookie a chance, even if he can be annoying, besides being strong. Then the green-haired one says that this is the problem. He questions why Momota fought like a weakling if he was so strong, and asks why all of a sudden he was able to detect the enemy's weak points. Then he says that they do not know if the boy is good at hiding his abilities or if he developed them suddenly. Jin then says that this is why he cannot entrust his back to him and asks the vice captain not to trust him either. Surprisingly, the blue-haired girl says that she agrees with Saru. She says that she does not suspect Momota, but she cannot deny that his power is something special. Thus, she is not yet able to place complete trust in him. Hearing this, Inuta says that only he and Misaki are on the boy's side. The redhead argues that it is okay not to know anything and that when the swords chose them, for whatever reason, they also knew nothing about each other. He states that what is important is that they are on the same side and that there is no problem in trusting the rookie, which almost makes him cry. Quickly, the hero enters the room calling for Jin. Surprised, the arrogant one then asks if the boy heard the entire conversation. At that moment, the hero approaches the green-haired one and asks what he wants. The boy says that it is true that he might be strong, but he does not know what the problem with his sword is and that he has always been able to fight alongside them. But he says that even so, he will become stronger and will not give up until he is accepted. Then he tells him to just watch. After saying that, both stare at each other. Jin comments that he does not have free time to waste watching the rookie as he is too busy defeating monsters. Hearing this, the redhead tells him not to worry about it, as he has always been like this. Suddenly, the vice captain says that what Inuna said has a fatal flaw. Smiling, she says that she cannot fully trust Momota, but even so, the man expects great things from him. Hearing this, the boy smiles and thanks her, saying that he will do his best to meet everyone's expectations. Hugging him, the bully says that doing his best is great in everything, but that he should listen to something. Putting him in a leg lock, he says that he will not have youthful moments like Misaki, if you know what he means. Meanwhile, the girl is alone, apparently very tired. Suddenly, some kind of horn begins to emerge from her body. The girl starts laughing maniacally while saying that the time has finally come for this person. Already on the next mission, the group heads to a place where the wind is blowing strongly. At that moment, the boy approaches Jin to talk to him. He asks the green-haired one if it would be possible to improve his ability, like he did with that underwater tunnel. Jin says he will try, but quickly cuts him off, saying that Momota should not assume how his ability works just because he saw it once. He does not even say why Momota assumed that Jin would be so weak that he would need the help of a rookie, given that he does not even know how his ability works. After that, he says that he has no time to waste talking with the boy, and that if he does, he should waste his time on something else. Hearing all that, the protagonist becomes extremely upset. At that moment, Jin notices something strange. Then quickly, he grabs his sword to prepare. A massive tornado forms around the group while Inuta wonders if this could be a monster. At that moment, Momota notices something strange and calls for Jin. He questions what this attack in front of him is. He warns that it is extremely powerful and then starts falling backward. Both he and Jin fall off the cliff. Misaki tries to go after them to save them, but Inuta stops her. He explains that it would be dangerous to pursue them recklessly because of the river. The hero is practically unconscious while Jin is submerged in the water, trying to save him. After bringing them to the surface, he questions what he was doing, calling him a bastard. After that, the boy manages to grab onto a log to prevent being carried away by the river. Irritated, Jin orders him to stay close to him for now. Using his ocular wisdom, the boy is able to see the weak points of monsters, even though they are underwater. Momota then warns that he will take care of it, but Jin stops him. saying that you should sit down and that it would be faster if he does it. However, the boy argues, saying that he can see the weak points. Suddenly, Jin starts getting frustrated and yells at the protagonist, calling him annoying. He says that the kid always trembles when it comes to facing monsters. He explains that he is not a child, so he orders him to shut up and sit down. However, the hero quickly takes the lead, saving Jin's skin. Yet this ability manages to pierce through the protagonist's sword, hitting the green-haired one. At that very moment, Sarubame falls into the river. Quickly, the hero dives underwater to save him and manages to bring him back to the surface. However, he seems to be unconscious and is also not breathing. And looking ahead, the hero realizes they are heading toward the end of the river. As a result, he ends up reaching a waterfall and falls down it, while still seeing the weak points. Using his ocular ability, he understands that even though he can see the weak points, he cannot hit them because he is in midair. At that exact moment, Jin regains consciousness, saying that everyone is extremely irritating. And grabbing his sword, he manages to keep both of them suspended in the air, stating that he will not be stopped by this light breeze. Shortly after, both the hero and Jin land on the ground alive. Irritated, the green-haired one says that the protagonist should have stayed quiet and let him handle it from the start. But he does not even finish his sentence, as he suddenly collapses to the ground due to a severe injury. At that moment, Momoto approaches to check the severity of the wound. Pulling up his pant leg, he sees that his legs are broken and questions if it happened when they fell into the river. Jin then says that his knee is broken and that it is the protagonist's fault, asking if he is happy now. The green-haired man tells the boy to stop with his annoying apologies. He also says that he does not need to feel depressed because he never trusted him from the beginning. This information completely destroys the boy, who instantly remembers his parents and siblings calling him useless. At that moment, the hero says that he tried his best to help everyone and that he should have known he would fail. Jin then stands up and says that he is pathetic, stating that he has not even tried anything yet. He begins questioning whether he has the conviction to destroy a gate and if he has ever done something he truly wanted to do. He argues that he can barely stand right now and that the only thing he can do is rely on his sword's viability. But he adds that this happens to many in the Force because due to the power the swords give, most believe that only they truly have power. Irritated and being very direct, Jin questions whether the hero is one of them. Momoto tries to argue but is unable to say anything at all. Jin steps closer, saying that he needs to change his way of thinking without wasting time blaming himself for everything. Hearing this, the hero understands that what Jin is saying is right, because his sword does not know whether any of them would have watched over him. He had thought that he could change something if he just became stronger. At that moment, the protagonist tries to say something, but a giant bird appears, interrupting their conversation. Seeing the creature, the boy wonders if it is another one of those monsters they just defeated. Instinctively agile, the hero rushes toward the bird's beak to save his companion. Continuing the conversation, even in this situation, the hero says that he has never had a conviction nor accomplished anything. He also says that people always mocked him and that it was difficult just to stay alive, having to run from everything. But even so, he decided to join the Force, finding something he wanted to be strong enough to protect. Then he asks if that is not a good enough reason to start. At that moment, the last thing Momoto sees is his friend trying to save him. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tab's channel.